our scene opens as a good, a decent crowd of diner patrons are sitting in the Plimpton. Business and life goes on as it always does every night after every afternoon and morning. Stefan Braunfiedler has retired, feeling that urge to feed himself, knowing that the only sustenance that he can glean in these nights are on that of living blood. And he's gotten a little more than a little tired of trying to hunt down alley cats just before the end of each of his nights. He finds himself in the men's room of the Plimpton. He's just oh my God, this guy's heavy. He sits the man who is sleeping at this point, fairly a fairly largely built blue collar worker. He thinks in a brief conversation, the man mentioned how tired he was, and well, Stefan wanting to keep this quiet. He he exercised that force of will that he has, more effective on mortals than anyone else. And the man just kind of slumped. As he did, Stefan caught him so that, you know, he would not be injured. He doesn't wish to do any harm. He just needs to feed. He can constantly hear the voices in the back of his head. One urging him, warning him that should he get any hungrier, there may be consequences. The other is just it's a constant reminder of instinct. Uh, it's a contradiction to the first, but it's an agreement. The voices eventually subside. He doesn't hear them. This is not his affliction. He knows this. These are like his conscience. It's not something alien to him. Once the man is firmly seated in such a way that he won't, slump over, hit his head, become injured, Stefan takes great strides to make sure that, he'll be safe. He'll wake up maybe thinking he fell asleep while using the restroom. Stefan himself does take actions to make it to where the man will have this reinforced when he wakes up. He, with the stall door closed and locked and kind of tucked away in a corner so that his feet aren't visible from under the stall door or wall, he bares his fangs and sinks into the man's neck. The first bit of lively blood that he takes in, feeling it slide down his throat, just it invigorates him. This is something he has not felt in quite a while. He's been on the edge of hunger for so long. And then a vision before his eyes as he feeds. He sees He sees the face of Cherie in his apartment. He sees the shaken form of this woman who he had only barely begun to get to know, but who trusted him. The, the murder that she herself put so much trust and confidence in him, she confided. She told him everything. And how much that brought back memories of the first time he ever went hunting alone. Now he remembers his last visit to the New Sarum docks. It wasn't his first. He must have forgotten how busy he has been since then. How very busy. How he has forgotten. He remembers. For so many years he laid low, just trying to stay out of, trying to keep from drawing attention of other vampires, just going about his life as a mortal who enjoys, who only gets out at night. Maybe he has a night job. This is what he always told himself. He continues to drink, and the vision plays off in his head from that first feeding night, or from that first night hunting. The woman he met on the docks, she was sad. She had gone through some terrible event that night, and Stefan just, he carefully and casually walked up to her. He asked what was wrong. How much confidence that stranger had put in him that night, and how he comforted her. And then the hunger took over. And before he knew it, the woman slumped in his arms. He remembered what his sire said: don't kill when you feed. Don't kill when you feed. Don't kill when you feed. There's no need to kill. Mortals have a right to exist. But it was too late by then. He slumped to his knees, holding this woman who had trusted him, this stranger on the docks. He knew he had to do something. But what? Before that night, he had been just as he had been before the night he was turned, he was embraced, he was brought into this existence. Before that night, he had been compassionate. He valued everyone's life like he did himself. But after that night, the feeling that something died in him, the horror before his eyes, the vision of the woman in the alley, secret that nobody would know. Nobody could ever know. Nobody would understand what was going through his mind. Continues drinking from the man in the bathroom. And his senses flash. His hearing goes acute. Doesn't know how it happens. It just happens. And he starts to hear the man's heartbeat slow. Very, very slow. He pulls his head up, grabs for some toilet paper and tries to clean himself up. He puts his ear to the man's chest. Oh no. No, 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 no. Again, the vision before his eyes and the panic goes back to Cherie. She had to have been killed for that murder. That's why her existence ended. She killed. No, he thinks of he snaps back to reality. He panics. He thinks, what can he do? What can he do? Out of instinct, he tries to recall what he knows. He just can't. He thinks he knows. He thinks he knows what he can do, but he's not sure. Begins to feel the liquid in his eyes well up as he looks at this mortal. He knows he can't let someone die. Too much death that he is no, 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 no. And he realizes that the man is only barely below the point of detrimental exsanguination. He thinks, and then before he can even complete the thought, he licks the wound on the man's neck to cover up the traces, bites into his own wrist, and carefully place it over the man's mouth, kind of tilting his head back, letting a little bit of his own VTMYTE pour back in. When he tries to be careful. He tries to really gauge it. Out of character, he will put concentrated will into this for focus, spending a willpower point for an auto. He slows down. And then he just kind of squeezes his wrist to kind of let it trickle, letting the precious blood slide down the man's throat. And then he closes the wound made by his own teeth over the man's wrist. On his wrist, and removes his hand from over the man's mouth. Kind of sets him back up a little bit, leaving his arm propped against a handicapped rail, hand against his face in a sleepy motion, while sitting there in the stall. He thinks to himself, feeling the pulse on the man's wrist and at his neck, counting, timing, trying to ascertain whether or not, he'll live. He's not sure. He just hopes. He hopes that the first night of his feeding, that the frenzy that came over him while he was just talking to that woman on the pier, trying to console her, the loss of control, the feeding, the inadvertent death that he had to cover up. He sees her body sink down under the waves at the end of the pier, the New Salem docks. He hears a voice in the back of his head. Why? Why? Why did you do this to me? He sees the woman, sees her lips moving, but not in concert with her words, sliding deeper and deeper under the waves, deeper and deeper down into the ocean. He sees vision of Cherie. Last time. Why? Why did you let me down? Why did you let me die? Why? The vision continues. over and over. He tries to snap out. He tries to he, he 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 tries to come back to his senses. The next roll is going to be a willpower roll, which is partially in concert with a waking trigger of his nightmares. He manages to keep it at bay. He doesn't slide into a waking nightmare. He comes back to his senses. He thinks, okay, I need to get out. Leaving the stall door locked, he slides himself under the door, or along the floor under the doorway, and gets back to his feet, kind of dusts himself off, even though the floor is pretty clean. He goes over to the sink and cleans himself up, makes sure there's no trace of blood, on his face. He just quickly swishes water in his mouth, but instead of spitting, he just kind of lets it slide. He cleans the sink all the same, washes his hands, dries them with the paper towels, and tosses them. At this point, he heads out into the diner, the busy diner. Walks over to the table in the corner that he was sitting at and leaves a 5 on the table under the coffee cup and his ticket to pay for his coffee that he had. He grabs the attention of a waitress and waves good, kind of puts his hand up. Good evening. I hope you have a pleasant fun. And points over to the table where his money. I have left payment for the coffee I ordered. And turns and walks out the diner door and into the darkness. Trying to find a shadowy route away from the diner and heading back to downtown and towards territory that is more familiar. Being at least partially satisfied that he's relatively unseen after he gets out of view of the diner windows. He begins to make his way back downtown, eventually hailing a taxi cab that he sees sitting parked along the side of the road, and heads back to his apartment for now to try and gather at least for this evening, what is left of his wits. Try to come back to his senses and reflect on the visions, and all the while thinking to himself with the vision of the woman on the pier 9 years ago, the vision of Cherie, the haunting vision and feeling that he had let down or betrayed 2 people. The slip in his own humanity. After some time, the cab pulls up off to the side of the diner. He sees the metal stairway go up to his studio. He pays the man and gets out of the cab. Heading up those staircase, the very, very, very familiar metal staircase. Unlocks his door, heads in, closing and locking it behind him. Eventually, after peeling off a coat or a jacket, sitting in his chair and letting his eyes close in contemplation.